Down through all the ages, people who ask big questions tend to answer them not just with theorems and attendant facts, but with great big stories. Stories about who we are, about what we're here to do, about where in the end we're headed. Stories about the arc of history itself and how it is moving. Stories about our own nature and our capacity, or sometimes infuriating lack thereof, to bend that arc. You know the stories, including the most famous ones. Designed in this and every age to answer the big questions, and today the big question I am returning to, as I do over and over again like some kind of homing beacon, is the great big question of human nature. The big story we start with is the one you can't ignore. A story I've preached from this pulpit before, which was so fun when I told it with the serpent being the hero. A story of Eden, of an apple. The story is set in the dense forest of some unknown land. The trees are weighed down with thick and dewy fruit. Lions and parrots and great big elephants wander sleepily through the canopy, and water trickles over stones too smooth to bruise the tender feet of God's pure, perfect creature, the human being. Made in his, yes, his own image, the pinnacle of a well-ordered creation, purity from the start. As the familiar story unfolds, readers of both childhood picture books and prevailing cultural metaphors learn that this bizarre rainforest at the dawn of time and its pure inhabitants are brought down by the simple act of eating a bit of very nourishing fruit. Fruit packed with wisdom instead of vitamins. The story tells us when Adam and Eve ate the fruit of knowledge, their eyes were opened. In disobeying God, they were literally made to be like gods, so close to being gods, in fact, that the big guy got jealous in the end. There they were, these beings made in God's own image, who now had the power to divine right from wrong, good from evil, beauty from decay. And on top of all that, so long as they were able to eat of this other tree, the tree of life, they would know these things and they would live forever, the story says. But God wouldn't have it. Not one for competition, he up and kicked them out. He set a guardian with a flaming sword beside the tree of life, sentencing, the story says, the first of our kind to eventual death because their purity was co-opted by the first moment they had knowledge. And this is the ancient Near Eastern Hebrew story that has come down to the Western Christian tradition as a uniquely painful doctrine that we know as original sin. A guilt that asserts itself at the deepest level of our being, translated through the hearts and the minds of countless theologians over the course of centuries. This doctrine of original brokenness has taken on a form that purports to tell us about who we are and what our nature is. Most prominently, it has been taken as an indicator that what we really are down deep below is wrong, that what we really are is sinful, impure, and that there is nothing we can do about it because the first of our kind sealed the deal on that a whole long time ago. This is the story about our nature, about human nature, that the Puritans carried to the shores of these United States when they stepped off the ships that carried them sickly over the sea. This is the story about human nature that undergirded the earliest years of Western religion in what would become our own backyard. And this was the story that fueled the literal burning of heretics in the family tree of both the Unitarian and Universalist traditions. The circuit-riding Calvinists in the American frontier preach that we are, every one of us, sinners in the hands of an angry God, and we are dangling over an abyss because of the purity we lost in that weird garden at the dawn of time. And that place of burning and of fear, that place of shame and of guilt, and the sure fire promise of our damnation, that is where our immediate theological ancestors in both the Unitarian and Universalist traditions come in. To oversimplify it a whole lot, When it comes to American religion, we have always been the people who believe in people. We have always been the people who told a different story about our own nature and our own destiny. As Unitarian Universalists, we are part of a religious movement that, unlike others, is not known for raising up guilt as a virtue. In fact, we are a tradition perhaps best known for our belief in the power and the strength and the capacity of the human spirit. We are the people who believe in people. And in the middle of the 20th century, when this beloved place was founded, the cornerstone was laid in part because liberal religion believed in people, because we believed in each other, because our church believed in us. For our founders, for the people who would evolve to be this congregation, all of you sitting here, moral advancement for the culture as a whole was possible, attainable. To some of us, it was inevitable. Ours was and always has been a fundamentally optimistic gospel of expansive human capacity and unending liberal progress. At the heart of us, the Unitarians and Universalists preached in the ages leading up to every cataclysm that there was no purity beckoning us back to the mists of history, but a steady advancement pulling us forward toward a future moral perfection we could create. We, the people who believe in people, have always pointed forward. Progress on the march. This is and has been our story. Not lost purity, but steady advancement toward perfection. Not brokenness, but a blessedness so complete that we have always moved toward its full realization. And that, my friends, is the religious movement that drew me in. That is the religious movement that made me a home when I was barely out of high school and had in fact been kicked out of all the essay contests to give other kids a chance. That was the movement that gave me not only a pulpit but a voice. That was the movement that salvaged me from shame. That was the Unitarian Universalism in which I was ordained at the turn of this century as yet another good moment for optimists. Before the cataclysms of our days, when it seemed perhaps that we were standing together on an escalator of history, and it was going up, 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 even if all we had to do was stand silently upon it. But let me be frank when I say that we do not today live in between the cataclysms of any age. Heck, we barely catch our breath between the breaking headlines. I do not need to give you a litany of the ways in which this age of ours is not the calm before the storm, but the very center of the storm itself. And the story we have been telling for 150 years, the story of endless human advancement and the fundamental goodness of every human soul and the progress of mankind, yes, mankind, onward and upward forever. Well, that story has always rung more true in the still point between the cataclysms than it does in the eye of the hurricane. And when the good people, when the people who proclaim a better way is possible, when the people who tell a story of that possibility, when the good people come face to face with the tragic dimensions of our time, we are able to meet those cataclysms head on only if we have the courage to tell ourselves a story that includes and does not eliminate the reality of our own suffering, the reality of our own failure, and yes, the reality of our own complicity in the cataclysms that bear down on us. Not for nothing. When the faithful optimist whose story of themselves and their nature is one of unending progress meet the backward lurch of history or the hard reality of injustice, those same faithful people can be fragile, can be ill-prepared, can be heartbroken and afraid. I know because sometimes those fragile ones, those ones whose story of endless progress has been interrupted, those ones who have been left reeling, sometimes those people are us. And that is why I wrote this book, which, by the way, is not a beach read, I should warn you. I wrote this book, a critique of liberal optimism is what it really is, not to crush your spirits, but to help equip us to live in these days and no other. You see, we have to learn to live authentically in the world as it actually is if we're ever going to collectively build the world as it should be. And even though we will not and cannot return to an ancient story that tells us every person is broken and we are sinful and the whole mess is doom and gloom, neither can we rest easy in an optimistic worldview which tells us we are always reaching toward perfection. Now is a time for telling the truth. Now is the time, said the great novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, now is the time to resist the slightest extension of what is right and just. Now is the time to speak up and wear as a badge of honor the opprobrium of bigots. Now is the time, she says, to confront the weak core at the heart of America's addiction to optimism. It allows too little room for resilience and too much room for fragility. Now is the time. Now is the time. Now is the time for us to say true things because we are not in the space between the cataclysms where our optimistic tradition has always shined. Indeed, now is the time to tell a story about our nature that does not either absolve us or drag us down, that doesn't place us unmoving on a broken escalator of progress or dangle us powerless over a pit of doom. Now is the time to tell a different story of who we are and who we can be. And so I didn't write this loving takedown of progressive optimism to depress us, but to kick us in the pants, to tell us that history needs us now, that our country needs us now, that we need each other now too badly to give in to the temptation to be fragile. And if we are going to be resilient, if we are going to be useful agents of change in this eye of the storm, we need to tell a different story to answer our biggest questions, which is why every 3 years I come back to the story we told the children last Sunday. The story I often say is my favorite of all time. You'll remember, if you were with us last week, that it's from the Hindu sacred texts of the Upanishads, and it starts with this brilliant young man, Svetaketu, speaking to his brilliant father, asking the biggest question he can think of, "What am I, father?" says the boy. And the father tells him, "See that fig tree? Pick a fig. Divide that fig. Pull a seed. A seed as tiny as a grain of sand from the ocean. Pull that seed." The father says, "Divide it. What do you see there, son?" The child says, "Nothing, father." The father, looking at this child more precious to him in all the world, says, "That art thou, my son. You are the seed inside the seed. You are the possibility inside the possibility. You are the tender nothingness from which all things arise. You are the beginning of every new beginning. You are the seed inside the seed. You are pure and unadulterated possibility. In this way, we are not inherently broken, as the old story would tell us. We are not, in fact, inherently blessed, as our optimistic tradition would have us think. We are not, in our very being, destined to heal the world or designed to be its undoing. We are neither innocent nor guilty from the get-go. What we are is powerful. We are the origin point of what will come, and we are gifted and burdened with the sheer weight of our own possibilities. In our very nature, we are not the perfect, pure flowers waiting to be corrupted, nor are we weeds overgrowing creation. We are the seed within the seed. We are that which stirs deep underground with the idea of what could be. And this, after all, is the seed time. In the pagan and earth-centered calendar, this very moment at the beginning of February is Imbolc, the time of stirring, it is called. It's traditionally the very first moment when seeds still buried in that dark, cold ground first start to spark with possibility. Imbolc is the moment of possibility, the time when winter hasn't let up its grip, but spring can't quite be grasped yet. And it's in that risky place, when the cold might snap shut all the buds and the light might filter down to warm it all, that a faithful seed at the heart of things starts its stirring. It's in that time, in this place, when we too can find ourselves in a time of stirring. We can move up toward the light, not in the assurance that everything is going to be okay, but in the simple reality that this power, this potential, this possibility is the greatest and mightiest risk we have ever known. This honest power, this great potential, might be a story that grants us resilience through the cataclysm. That power may in fact be a better story than the ones we've told before. You see, purity is a thing you can't ever get back. And perfection, it's a state you can conveniently never achieve. But possibility is a state of being that never lets you go. Possibility never lets us off the hook, and possibility never draws us outside of the circle. As human beings, what we have before us is not the burden of inherent brokenness or the freedom of inherent goodness, but the responsibility of inherent possibility. We are in our essence neither good nor evil, neither innocent nor guilty. We are potentiality. And so our spiritual work as we go forward from this time, back out into the storm, our spiritual work is not to regain some imagined purity or reach out towards some distant perfection, but to remind ourselves that there is a seed here, that it is always stirring. That art thou, the seed within the seed, the beginning of a beginning. That art thou. So go in this time of stirring to become all that your love might imagine.